Okay. Hi, this is Dana. It looks like we have a few people joined already, so we'll go ahead and get started, and if more people join, then I can welcome them to the webinar as well. Just to repeat, if you want to use the chat feature throughout the webinar, you can click on the lower right and open up the chat box, and we'll be monitoring it on this end. So that's the best way to ask questions. Please ask questions throughout. And we look forward to hearing from you throughout the webinar. All right. EcoSpark, if you don't know, is a small organization that's dedicated to helping connect people with the environment. My name is Dana Bookbinder. I'm the Citizen Science Coordinator here. So we're going to be talking about some of the School Watch resources that are available for teachers and other educators throughout Ontario to help you animate school grounds with citizen science. EcoSpark empowers people to take an active role in protecting and sustaining their local environment. We give people the tools for education, monitoring, and influencing positive change. And it's really fun to work here. I just want to let you know some of the projects that we've been doing lately have been out in the field with school children and also with adults in mostly Toronto's parks. And everybody's been very excited to take advantage of the spring weather. EcoSpark gratefully acknowledges that the lands on which we run citizen science activities are the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit River, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. Hi, Marina. Thanks to everybody who's joined. Again, you can use the chat feature to communicate with me. Also in the office tonight is our wonderful education assistant, Holly Campbell, who is helping out monitoring the chat. Some of the programs that we have are Changing Currents, which is a well-known EcoSpark program where your students can get big waders on and march out into the streams and learn about all of the cool stream ecology. So registration for the fall Changing Currents program opens June 4th. So be sure and check that out on our website at ecospark.ca. Nature Academy, Greenbelt, and Complete Communities are other great EcoSpark programs with a lot of free online resources, including teacher guides to help your students learn about the environment as close as your backyard at school and at home. My interest with citizen science at EcoSpark is really getting people to look into nature nearby and looking at nature together. So if you're not familiar with the term, citizen science involves everybody in the community, from professionals to people with absolutely no scientific backgrounds. I've had very successful 6-year-olds contribute to citizen science projects and collect real data to help us understand the environment. In this way, citizen science is very inclusive. We have large databases that are filled with information about everything from the birds that are migrating north this time of year to our weather data, like rain gauges that collect just the very local data point of how much precipitation fell at your school, combined into sometimes global databases. So the data gets to be used by everybody. It's all free, available online. We'll talk about some neat projects today that you can try out even right now. And all of the data is available for people to actually do studies with. So you can set up a project with your class to study science right where you are and compare that information to other locations. This, I think, makes it very important. We know that for ecological information, it's great to connect our what's going on right where we are with some broader trends. Threats can be global in nature, such as climate change, and they can be very local. So it's important to have data coming into citizen science at all scales. And as you know, with EcoSpark, we're interested in connecting our actions to the local environment. So we find that citizen science participants are actually getting invested in what they're learning about because it's so hands-on. So in this photo, you can see some, I think this was a middle school where as young as grade 6, students are doing that hands-on learning and then tying their data and their information into issues about water quality. So how was our stream different from last year when other students measured it? And how does it compare with the stream that's a little bit further away and has different inputs? Our citizen science protocol that we'll talk about today is very straightforward. We'll review some of the School Watch Guide activities that you can try with your own students. Choose the monitoring activity, and we'll go through a sample one tonight. Choose a site, map transects, collect and submit data, and then analyze and share results. So for any citizens in science project that we talk about, you can take each of these steps to involve your students in a full scientific process and contribute real data. The School Watch Guide that I've been mentioning is a series of resources that will be available free online on our website. And I think we can put the link up in the chat in a moment. And that set of resources is basically a how-to for projects. So things that you might think about when you're just excited to go outside in your school grounds and you don't know where to start. And then projects that you can do from start to finish with your class. So because this is in development, your voice really matters. So we're looking for feedback on the resources. And because this is sort of a preview webinar, I'll be emailing all of you those resources that will then be available to everybody online in the coming weeks. So you can please review them. Any feedback would be more than welcome. And you can use the chat function tonight to give us feedback as well. So we're going to try this out. Our eager group of small group of large participants, thank you for coming. If you don't mind, please type in the chat box now what it is that you've noticed on your school ground this spring, or it could even be in your backyard. Anything that sort of struck your fancy. It doesn't have to be very scientific. It could be any birds that you've seen. It could be the activities that you notice in nature, maybe from your classroom window or maybe as you walk into or out of your school. If you have a school ground greening project, that's even better. That means that there's an area that's already been established as something like an outdoor classroom or a learning laboratory. It could be a garden, or it could be a forested area outside of your school, for example, where students can go and learn about nature without leaving the property. So I'm just curious what you all have seen, if there's been any insects buzzing or any projects that you might already be involved in on your school grounds. It sounds like there's a little bit of an audio issue, so I'll try and speak up louder. Sorry about that. And if you have any other thoughts, you can type them in the chat box. Wonderful. It sounds like people have seen birds and insects. And of course, we know that the weather is a major factor in how active our wildlife is. The weeds are coming out since we haven't touched the garden. There are a few bees. I'm so glad to hear that you have a garden. That's wonderful. Weeds are actually a really neat category of plants that we look in with some of the School Watch resources, because the blooming of any flower, whether it's a weed or a more intentionally planted flower or a native plant, all of these, when they flower, it's a very good marker for us to tell when the springtime has arrived. So everybody knows, oh, it's cherry blossom time. But we can actually look at that scientifically over time and find out about how our climate is shifting. Ground cover, yeah, that's true. It's good to get students to be looking low and high. You can even have students go out and claim a small section of their schoolyard as a sit spot and stay in that one, it could be 1 meter square, stay in that area for say 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and just observe what they see. They can use a journal to do this. They can notice what wildlife is coming in and out, and what plants are up to. And if they have that same sit spot and notice it shift over time, then they're learning in a very intuitive way about nature. Just started planting butterfly flowers today. Wonderful. So if you're planting for pollinators, you can think about the insects using plants through the full blooming season. So it's great to have blooms that are coming up soon, and you can have things that are blooming all the way through the fall instead of just one big feast all at once. You can have an active buffet for them through the year. All right, well, that's great. Thank you so much for participating. And we'll have another chance to do so in a little bit. I'm going to tell you about some projects that you might be excited about with these gardens. So the first project I want to mention is called Plant Watch. You may have heard of this. This is a Canadian citizen science project that is from across Canada. And we have a few EcoSpark citizen scientists who've given this a shot. So all you do for Plant Watch is go to their website, naturewatch.ca/plantwatch. And you can poke around if you'd like to, just explore, or you can go ahead and register a site. So this might be your school location. We suggest that teachers set up one account for their class and then submit as a group together. And you would enter in the information that you're seeing about how plants change through the years. So depending on who you're talking with, if you have younger students, this would be plant birthdays. So just like people, plants have birthdays as well. They're having a birthday every time that they come into bloom, for example. So you can review with students how every plant goes through its life cycle, and they'll say, oh, the birthday is when you plant it. That's a good one. And then the next steps would be when a bud bursts. It's called bud burst, when it turns into bloom. And then when the whole plant is in mid-bloom. And the next step that you would do with Plant Watch is online, find a few plants that you can recognize with confidence. It might be a dandelion, which is watched in Ontario. It might be a lilac. And these plants that you're familiar with tend to be the ones that are on Plant Watch as well. So review the website first, choose one or two plants that are listed in the Plant Watch page, and they have one specific to Ontario, so that's what I would suggest starting with. And when you have a plant selected, figure out what time of year it will be blooming. So right now I would suggest lilac because it's just coming into full bloom in the next few days in our area. The last one that I passed was just starting to come out. If you want to try this project next year, then you can familiarize yourself with a whole range of plants, or even plant one specifically to participate in citizen science. So the plants that you go out, you would take a data sheet from Plant Watch. You can print them right off your website. Have students observe the plant every day leading up to one of those milestone events. In science, we call it phenology. That's just the plant birthdays. So you're watching for that date of the bud burst, for example, and then you write down the date and submit it online on the website. This goes into a database that is shared across Canada in this case, and tracks the dates of species bloom times throughout the year and throughout the country, so you can compare the results. And I think it was more than 100 years ago, there were records taken of some of the earliest cherry blossom festivals, for example, that municipalities had. So we have records going back long enough that we can see long-term trends with some of these plant bloom times, and that's where we get to learn about climate change. As we know, as the climate warms, the seasons have shifted. That affects our plants, which affects the entire ecosystem, all the plants that rely, all the other species that rely on our plant blooms. I'm just going to pause there and see if anybody has any questions so far. You can use the chat box. Okay, excellent. So we're going to go through 2 or 3 more projects, and I'm just going to move quickly through them so that you can see what they are. All of these resources will be available to you. Again, I'll be emailing these directly to you because when you registered, your email was listed there. So don't worry about jotting everything down, but it'll be in the chat box for you as well. The next project I wanted to talk to you about is called Bumblebee Watch. This one is close to my heart because some of my earlier training was specific to bumblebees. That it's fun for students because they tend to recognize a bumblebee even if they can't name it. They tend to know that it's those big fuzzy bees that are coming around this time of year. For Bumblebee Watch, all you do to participate is take a photo of any bumblebee that you see and submit it online to the www.bumblebeewatch.org website. And then a whole team of experts, so these are bumblebee experts, will review any postings that you've created and let you know if your species identification was correct, let you know a little bit more information about what it is that you've submitted. So the value of having this is that you're learning more about the species, but people can study how pollinators are coming out, which plants they're visiting, where they're located, and all of that information gets mapped onto the Bumblebee Watch website. So you can pull up with students the map and see where your observations have not only been submitted, but verified by experts and then posted online. There's quite a few citizen science projects that follow that model. If bumblebees aren't your thing, you can look up salamanders and a whole range of different species. So those resources are in the School Watch Guide as well. The School Watch Guide's tree resources are numerous, but I'm just going to point out one right now, which is the TD FEF website. This we found is fun for students to use on school grounds because it's not too elaborate. You can get much more in depth with doing tree canopy measurements, for example, and there are resources for that if you want to do a whole unit to learn about your trees and their ecosystem benefits for your class, for your school. But the TD Treebee starts out small. It just helps you identify some trees on your campus and plot them on a simple map. So you would go out, find a tree that you like. They're even coming up with an app that I hear is in the works and will be live very soon. So you can take your smartphone out and use it to help you identify the tree with a simple dichotomous key. That is, you can say, is the leaf this shape or that shape? And it will guide you through to figure out what tree it is that you have. And then you map that and see how your map, all the great trees that you have at your site, compare with the rest of your municipality and beyond. So this is a Forest Ontario project. It's Ontario-wide in scope, and we have other tree resources that let you tie your tree benefits to citizen science projects that are going on internationally as well. The School Watch Guide bird section is really fun this time of year. Birds are quite active in the winter, so that's a good time to look for them. But there's a special project in May that's happening for Schoolyard Bird Blitz. And this is something that it's very simple to get involved in. You go out with your class for as little as 15 minutes and just write down all of the birds that you see. Enter that information onto the Birds Canada website. The link is here. Thanks, Holly. You might say, okay, well, we're not sure with our class which birds it was that we see. Bird Studies Canada lets you print out a very specialized list of birds that are most likely to be seen on your site. So if you go onto the website, you can type in your address and it will make a beautiful color card that you can print out of, say, 30 bird species that you're most likely to find, with a beautiful image that the students just have to say, it looked like that one. And then they don't have to know that it was a goldfinch, as the image has here. They can just point to the one on the card. So here at EcoSpark with students, we've actually laminated those printed cards and have them use stickers. So even very young students can come and place a sticker on the bird card if they see one during their bird watching session outside. Doesn't matter how many participants you have, you can do it with your whole school if you'd like. And all of the information goes into a shared database so we can learn about all of the birds that are visiting all of our schoolyards across Canada. Bird Studies Canada also offers a lot of free teacher resources in English and French. So check them out. There's beautiful posters that you can print out. Lots of great resources to get advised. And it looks like we have a question. Has the bird watching activity been done with high school students before? For sure. High school students, I think, make really good birders, especially because a lot of the best birders that I've met are high schoolers. You'd be surprised when you go to events who turns up to have all of this naturalist knowledge. But sort of tap into your local resources and see if any students are already excited about any of these citizen science projects. For sure, Bird Studies Canada's Schoolyard Bird Blitz can be done by any school group, including for adult education. And it's tied into other Bird Studies Canada projects. So if you want to explore that a bit more in our School Watch Guide, you can see how it's linked with eBird. It's the name of one of the larger data sets that involves anybody from across the population and across the world who's interested in birding. And you can take it into as great a depth as you'd like. There's probably hours of online videos and maps that you can pull up. So for example, in this image, you'll see a robin. If your students see a robin, you can go onto this Bird Studies Canada website and through their eBird link, explore all of the American robin sightings that have been found, let's say, across the world. And it'll just color the map dark with all of the citizen science observations that have already been reported. So that's a great way to actually pull up the data and see what's going on with your species that you've observed. There are curriculum connections for actually all of these projects, and the links at the end will have those pre-made lesson plans that fit with different curriculum guidance. So for Bird Studies Canada, I think they even have an education at birdstudies.org is the email address, and you can find their whole website that just devoted to education resources for all ages. So as we went through our steps, this is sort of exploring a few of the projects that you can do. Believe it or not, that was just a few. Now, if you have one in mind, how would you actually go about implementing it? I think the important thing to do first is settle on your monitoring activity. You're interested in looking at birds? Okay, do you want to actually do that 15-minute bird study? Or do you want to look at every bird that comes to a bird feeder you've put out outside of your classroom? You can narrow down any of the projects into a specific monitoring question. And I think it's great to involve students in this step. Ask them what they're interested in. Ask them how they would frame their goal or their study question around some of the larger environmental issues that they're interested in. So if you have a planting project planned, I hear from a lot of teachers that they're at least interested in putting in a garden or increasing their garden. Somebody mentioned that they want to do more pollinator plants. You have a perfect opportunity to study before and after. How many pollinators did we see when we surveyed before we did the planting project? And then how many did we see when we surveyed afterwards? That way you have just a little bit more information about what benefits you're causing for the environment, which is a positive note for students. You can also look at just a specific question that relates to what you already have. So on what date will our plant species bloom from the plants that are already in our schoolyard? How many birds can students identify at our school in 15 minutes would be the one that was related to that Bird Studies Canada project. I think you should ask your students why it is that they want to study birds. Have them look into it a little bit more and find out about the bird life cycles. So once you have your study, your monitoring question, you want to choose a site that makes sense. So most teachers and educators have this down pat. Some people are a little bit nervous about going outside, especially if they haven't taught outside at their schoolyard yet. So just scope it out first. We ask that you review any of your school board safety policies about doing outdoor work. All of the projects can be done right on a school ground site, so you don't need to actually leave, which is great. Interests, you can ask students to help you explore and figure out where exactly you want to be looking at pollinators. Where do they think will be the juiciest spots for finding out about tree canopy? And then access. So given your students' needs and the possibility of repeating this study over time, how will you be able to manage the logistics? You can just do a study once, but it's actually beneficial if you can repeat it, right? So we know from scientific research that continuous monitoring provides more valuable data because you can start to see shifts over time. I think that's really important for students too, because they start to learn about how impacts affect the environment. It'd be awesome if your school could even invest in doing year after year the same study. So make sure you document very well whatever study it is, which site you went to, and how long you looked at that site, for example. Species and subjects of interest. If you have a particular passion yourself, go for it. There's probably a citizen science project for it. You can consider the habitat that you have. Some schools are lucky enough to have woodlots, vernal pools, those sort of seasonal wetlands that harbor salamanders. And a lot of schools now have gardens, which is wonderful. And you can look at gardens from a lot of different wildlife and ecological benefits standpoints. So when you go outside, you can always just take a picture of something cool that you saw and submit that in for citizen science. That's called like a point survey. So for example, I saw a bear, I took a picture of the bear, I just write down what time of the day I saw it and where it was located. That's valuable and interesting, and I encourage you to always have your ears and eyes open when you're outside if you see anything kind of interesting like the students do. The other way that you can do this is actually map out a transect and return to that site again and again. So this could be as simple as marking out a pathway that students would, for example, monitor pollinators across 50 meters of your garden. And at 7:30, just to let you know, we'll be wrapping up in a few minutes here. Thanks for your patience. There we go. We'll have time for questions right at the end. So again, you can map that transect along a garden. And then you could collect and submit data online. So any citizen science project that's part of the School Watch project will allow you to submit your information by a simple form online. You can even do smartphone entry for some of the projects. The important thing is to remember that you actually involve students in submitting the data. So it's not just to be contained in your group. That's very valuable for education. But because this is all real data, it's great if you can share it just a little bit further and take that step and have students enter it. After they've entered their data, you can go ahead and analyze it with them. This could be as simple as pulling up a map. The map shown on your screen here was swallowtail butterfly records from across Ontario and beyond. And you can see how many citizen scientists have taken that step of entering their data. How cool would it be for your students to see a swallowtail butterfly outside and then actually see it on this map as part of a larger community of swallowtail butterflies, and see how many there were at the next school over, for example. You can analyze results in other forms as well. Often you can download data, for example, into an Excel file and see how it shifts over time. I can relate the issue to, relate the project to a larger issue for your students as well. So if they're involved with, let's say, water quality through a program like EcoSpark's Changing Currents, they might be interested in learning what affects water quality and why did they get the results that they got. Some hypotheses that the students have come up with can actually be explored with some of the resources through the School Watch Guide, or we can direct you to more specific local resources if you have a question. You can always contact me at office here, and my contact info will be at the end. And then we'd love to hear from you. So if you have the opportunity to do any citizen science, especially with students, just send us a note. You can send us an email. You can always post it through our social media channels. And I think we can post that link, if you don't mind, Holly, for the Facebook. Thanks so much. So we'd love to see photos of what you've been up to. Okay, so it's your turn again. I know it's getting late, sorry, but I was hoping that we could go through a small exercise now where you come up with an action plan for any idea that you might have. This could be imaginary. If your school doesn't yet have the resources to have a forest in place, you can do a citizen science project in an imaginary forest. Better yet, try and come up with something that you could actually implement even in these last few weeks of the school year that's related to science outdoors. So we're gonna go ahead and type in the chat box for this, and it can be any activity that you've come up with, and then your thoughts, even if it's just, okay, I'm kind of curious about the bird project, but I don't know where to start. You can type in those notes into the chat. And I will do a chat as well, just for an example. So we're going to go ahead and say the Bird Studies Canada. So for Bird Studies Canada project planning, I'm sorry, my chat is only going to one person, but I'll go ahead and talk you through it. For the Bird Studies Canada project planning, the activity idea will be that you're involved with the students outdoors on your schoolyard and watching birds. And let's say you want to do a 15-minute bird study. And your time frame would be anytime during the month of May, because that's when the project takes place. You would go ahead out with students to do that project. Collaboration, well, let's think a little bit outside the box. Maybe your students are avid bird watchers and they could encourage another class to participate as well. You can even think to the broader community. Is there a community center nearby that you can entice some bird watchers to get involved as well and involve other volunteers that way? You would do the planning. So for that study, all you would need to do is go onto the website and print out your data sheets, which are those colored cards with the bird images on them. And then be sure that you have all of your outdoor materials that you need based on your school board guidelines for doing outdoor work. And the supplies and logistics for this one are a pencil and paper to write down which birds you saw, or that sticker system that I told you about. What will you do with the data? Well, you might use it for education. You could also use it for stewardship. So if we did this bird study and we only saw 2 species, what kinds of things could we do to encourage more birds to visit our schoolyard? Maybe the class could brainstorm ideas and incorporate a stewardship activity as well. That's kind of how you would walk through a project. Does anybody have a project that they're curious about? You could just type the project topic in the chat right now. Okay, we heard pollinators earlier. So again, for the pollinators project, you could do a bumblebee watch if you happen to see bumblebees. But you could also use a project like Plant Watch and just focus in on the plants that are part of the citizen science project. Like we'll plug in our computer there. The next step, if we don't have more thoughts, oh, here we have them. We will be examining grass species that may or may not survive the year and the wear and tear of kids playing on it. Time frame 2 weeks, great. We plan, thanks Holly. We plan to share the data with parent council, excellent, in hopes that we can restore part of our field. Awesome, okay, so grass species are often underlooked, but actually our unpaved surfaces are excellent for water quality management. So I would suggest that some of the citizen science projects you can look at for grass are more on the habitat scale. There's an excellent one called Habitat Network. And I'll go ahead and skip to the end. Holly doesn't have the cheat sheet for this one yet, but I'll go ahead and tell you verbally because this is a cool project. Habitat Network would let you look at your any surface that you have, whether it's paved or unpaved, and actually quantify that. So for example, in this image, you can see that I've highlighted a property line. This is where I used to live in North Carolina, but you could do it for any property as well. And then colored in different shapes to represent the habitat that was there. So the dark green was forested area, the purple was garden, the maroon was paved areas. So that would be your school parking lot, for example, and the buildings themselves. Once you have that into the map, you can see how your habitat matches the habitat of any other place throughout the habitat network. So this one is international in scale. It's at www.habitat.network, or the more direct link is in the chat. And you can also, what's cool about it is you can record any changes over time. So if you go in and make those awesome, looking at grass species that might do better, and you have healthier, more lusher grass, you could change your polygon to reflect that you have more vegetation in that area, and it improves the entire habitat network map. So thanks so much for participating. I'm going to go ahead and hop back up in our slides. Preview there. And I would very much appreciate your input if you have a chance. There's few enough people here that I'll follow up with an email just in case you have any questions. But there is an evaluation if you'd like to do it that way. So our School Watch evaluation is in the link, and that would be the most straightforward way to give us feedback on the School Watch project. And Michael says, thank you. We will do a general citizen science study to watch for bee, bird, and trees near our school. Time frame 3 hours. We will share the data with our principal to see if we can ask for more green spaces. Awesome. So this sounds like a comprehensive project. I love that it's gung-ho, and you can, if you have enough students, you have a lot of eyes on the environment, and so you can take advantage of that and look for everything all at once. If you have the opportunity to tie a citizen science project into at least one of those so that you're doing the full steps of going online, finding out what the project specifics are, and entering that data in, that would be wonderful. The data that comes out of all of these citizen science projects can totally meet your needs. So I've seen principals that were very inspired just by teachers' enthusiasm to get their students outside. And I hope that works well for you. At EcoSpark, we have, for example, on our Twitter feed, there's students who have gone on to share their results with the broader community, and that can be a powerful voice for change as well. Oh, wonderful. And Marina shared a website with us on Ontario grasses. So definitely check that out. Thank you. So we'll have a few questions. And it looks like Michael's pointed out a very important funding source, which is the Biodiversity Education and Awareness Network grants. I think they're usually $500 for a biodiversity project, and pretty broad-minded about what that entails. So please do look into it. That's again Bean, and I think we can get the link to it, or you can Google Biodiversity Education and Awareness Network. So I want to thank you all for your great ideas. Also the educators and teachers who have helped put in just ideas for the School Watch development process. So what worked for classes, what did they think sounded exciting? And then citizen science project coordinators who also consulted in the making of all the resources. We're incredibly grateful for TD Friends of the Environment for funding this project. It's been a tremendous spring for School Watch. I'm grateful to them. And see here. We have a lot of excellent photographers who've helped out. So I'll leave that in the slide deck that I'll share with you. And again, all the links which were in the chat can be found in the slide deck, which will be shared. And you can check out all of the citizen science projects and their amazing set of resources online. And then please contact me if you have any questions, especially if you have any ideas going forward. This is a young project and we hope to grow it. So we'd love to hear what works for you, what you're excited about for citizen science going forward. My contact information is listed there and I hope to hear from you soon. And Joyce has reminded me that the reason for holding this webinar tonight actually is that it's International Day of Biological Diversity. So thank you all for looking at everything from grass to bees and trees on your sites. And let us know how everything goes on your ends, and check out more EcoSpark updates for School Watch in the coming weeks on our website. Again, that EcoSpark School Watch link can be found on the chat, or it's ecospark.ca/school-watch. Any questions at all? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stay online for a few minutes in case there's questions. But if you're clicking off now, thank you so much for joining. And we'll watch the chat here. Okay, that's great. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining. If you have any follow-up questions afterwards, please feel free to email me or give me a call at the office. And I hope you have a wonderful spring and that all of your projects go really well. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.